I could rant about this forever, but I'm going to try to be as succinct as I can. I think this is important. I don't know if it's the biggest problem in the universe, but it's definitely the biggest problem in the golden butterflies community. And it is imposter syndrome. It runs rampant through me, through everyone else here, I think, and through the arts in general, especially. I mean, it's bigger than just the arts, but it is massive in the arts. This problem of people walking around telling themselves that they are not it, which, as Alan Watts once said, is the very same experience as it. Some people just do it more out loud than other people. But, like, if you listen to what art is saying, it's about feeling insecure. Some people are willing to publish their insecurities. Some people are not willing to publish their insecurities. That's pretty much the only line between whether you are a published creator or a not published creator. Whether you're a popular creator or not depends on how well you manage to tap into your insecurities in a way that makes other people feel more secure about themselves, either because they share the same insecurities as you and they feel seen, or because you are helping them to overcome those, because maybe you have overcome those insecurities, or at least you're presenting yourself as having done so, and you're sharing the methodologies that you've used. And either way, people will copy what you're doing because they, see it as, oh, well, this made me feel better. And so, I'm going to use it to make other people feel better. But I think people start feeling worse about themselves when they can't quite get the effect that they're looking for in copying what they're trying to do from someone else, because it always comes down to copying. It's weird, people get in their head about like making a great original piece of art, but your idea of a great original piece of art is based on other pieces of art you've seen. Like, what qualifies for that for you is entirely based on other pieces of art. So you'll be sitting here like, I need to make a real movie that that has my own voice but also is at the level of Quentin Tarantino or whatever. It's like, well, how are you going to make something at the level of him without just doing what he's doing? If you're doing something different, it's going to be different. And people, I don't know, maybe they think that oh, well, the camera work has to be that good. And it's like, well, then you just need to hire that cameraman, like that's a guy's style. It's not a generic copyable thing. Like, every cameraman has their own style. They just don't get talked about a lot. So people don't tend to notice that it's like a specific guy making a movie look away. They just think, oh, this movie looks good. And so if I'm good, I get to work with somebody who makes a thing look good. And you just got to know that guy. Quentin Tarantino was a nobody who worked at a video store, and he just showed his scripts. Like, he kept talking about movies, recommending movies to people who, in living in LA, and, he was going, like, trying to become an actor, so he was hanging around places where actors hang around, and because he gave good movie recommendations, somewhat famous people were willing to look at his scripts and pass them around to other people when they realized that they were good. And ultimately, he made connections with Harvey Keitel, who funded Reservoir Dogs. Like, just a guy who had a lot of money and thought, oh, I want to be in this movie because it's a fucking great script. And when they worked together, they made test films and stuff, and ultimately found something that could convince a professional crew, to come together to make this film under Quentin Tarantino, because he proved that he knew what he was doing enough as an actor director to make the thing possible. He had the vision, but it does, if you go watch the test movie, like, it doesn't look great. Quentin Tarantino doesn't make his movies look great. The camera person he hires does. I hope this is making sense. What I mean about imposter syndrome is, like, people are blaming themselves for not rising to the full level of people who aren't actually doing everything themselves, who are relying on oftentimes hundreds of other people, if not thousands of other people, if not tens of thousands of other people, if not hundreds of thousands of other people. If you're a Marvel producer, hundreds of thousands of people to, like, working with you to make it possible to do what you're trying to do. And if you are blaming yourself for not being, Kevin Feige, well, like, there's only one. There's no need for another one. You know, you could just work for him if you have something to contribute to that, or make your own thing. But like, you have to be of the mindset that you are one part of a thing that involves 100,000 or more people, you know? And that is a very humbling thing. That is not an ego thing. You know, like, if you're trying to control it, it's not going to work. You have to be of the mentality that you are leading it, which means listening to what people want and trying to figure out how to make that possible. That is what leading is. That's why I'm going to be a great president, because I understand leadership. It's about listening to what people want and figuring out how to make that possible, which doesn't always mean doing what they say. It means figuring out if what they say is plausible, is correct, you know, and acting on what makes the most sense when you've listened to everyone and compared all the notes and everything like that, you know, but also being able to make a measured decision, not a hasty one. So, as a creative person, how do you know when you've crossed the threshold from being like a novice into a professional? How do you know when you've gone from being on the outside to on the inside? And the answer is, there just isn't a time that happens. There are people who are at the top of the game who have imposter syndrome because they're comparing themselves to legends. You know, like, if you're one of the best, if you're fucking LeBron James, you're insecure about the fact that people don't think you're as good as Michael Jordan. You know, like, you're like, what do I have to do to prove that I am legitimately the greatest basketball player of all time? And maybe he believes that he is, but it must eat at him on some level that it's not universally approved that way. You know, and it's not that you can ever get true universal approval, but at the very least, enough of a overwhelming consensus that you feel like something is true. And I think that's what a lot of people are looking for, is they want a consensus on them as an artist. They want enough approval from others that it makes them feel like, oh, I did it. I am an artist now because other people told me so. And I'm just telling you, you're an artist no matter what. Everyone's an artist. People just draw lines in the sand about where they consider something to become art or not. And all of those lines are dumb and meaningless, and I can argue out of all of them. Try to draw me a line where you think art begins and just being yourself ends, and I guarantee you I will argue you out of it. I will definitely argue you into the position that you're just innately an artist, that art is just a way of living. Creation is a way of living, is what I should say. This word art, I don't really know what it means in specific, but creativity, I understand. Creativity is just a way of existing in the world. It's something innate to the human experience, something we all do. Someone at some point was trying to catch a chicken, and they figured out that they could throw a rock at it, and that's creativity. You know, like, we're doing that all the time. How do I get what I want? If what I want is like a friend who understands me on a personal level, but I'm only good at communicating through art, then I'm putting my art out there hoping that somebody's going to see it, who's going to understand it, and who's going to react in a way that communicates their understanding to me. But I can't predict what that's going to look like until it actually happens. So, you know, you've got this insecurity of, am I ever going to feel seen? Am I ever going to feel like this is actually doing what I want it to do? And for some people, it just never will. And for other people, you can come to accept that, like, the point of this is not for you to be a real artist or to be a professional or whatever. The point of it is to accomplish what you are setting out to do through creativity. If your goal is to make something that you will personally enjoy, then you should make something you'll personally enjoy and don't worry about what anyone else thinks about it. If your goal is to make something that other people will enjoy, figure out what other people enjoy and make that. If you don't like certain people, you only want other people to enjoy your stuff, figure out what you can do to piss off the people you don't like in the process of making something that people you do like will enjoy. You know, you can control the effect that your creativity has. You just have to be thinking about the effect. You can't be thinking about it as like, I'm just going to make something good and then someone's going to see it and think it's good and then now I feel good. Yeah, sure, that might happen, but that's not very deep, like it's not satisfying long term. That's as simple as getting a like on a picture. We've all gotten likes, I hope. If you've never gotten a single like on a post, leave a comment below. I will like every single comment on this post. You will have gotten your foot through the door. If you don't know what to comment, just leave a fucking heart emoji. I will give you the experience of having had a like and a heart on the internet. It's cheap. It's not deep. It doesn't mean much. It feels all right. It feels like, wow, I know for a fact this person saw me. But what do they know about me? What do they care? Will they remember? That's the stuff that you start thinking, okay, well, what kind of relationship am I trying to have with this person? Who do I want them to see me as? Who do I want to become through them? Who do I want to help them to become? What do I want to help them make? What do I want to make them feel? Put all of that into your work. That's more important than like, is this real art? No, no, it's not. None of it is. I can argue you down from thinking a thing is good. Give me a thing, I'll tell you why it sucks. I promise. Give me anything. I would name anything like famous, but like you've all heard counter arguments for all things. Anything is good. You know what the argument is for why it sucks. You just don't agree with it. But it's there. I can make the argument for why anything sucks. A lot of it just sucks for existing in the first place when it doesn't need to, but that's fine. The goal isn't to not suck. The goal is to be effective, to get the effect you're looking for. Do you want to feel better about yourself? Do you want to process an emotion that you're struggling to express in another form other than creativity? Also, speaking is creativity, by the way. Like just saying stuff, typing shit, like writing random Discord messages. It says just as much about you as anything else. Every single thing you do, every motion you make says something about you. I was told that the way I move was beautiful by a friend of mine recently, who just was observing the way I move, And I felt appreciated about it because it's like, yeah, well, I do move in a very deliberate way. There's an element of practice to it. Like there's an element of, this is how I want to move. And so I'm doing it on purpose. And if somebody likes that, that's really cool. It's not something I get complimented on ever. But when you have that recognition, it's like, okay, that's nice. It definitely makes me feel a little bit more, like I'm allowed to be the way I am. I think that's what a lot of people are really looking for the most from their creativity is like, someone tell me I'm allowed to be like this. And I'm just going to tell you, like, you're always allowed. And unless you're like literally hurting someone through what you're saying, which a lot of people are. And legally, you're still allowed to do that. Let me be clear. I believe in freedom of speech in America. I just don't think you should abuse it. I think that just makes you a shitty person. So I think the best way to be creative is to be creative responsibly. Again, what's the effect you're trying to have? Are you trying to ruin someone's day? You can also do that, it'll just make people hate you. So you have to be ready. I guess I would also encourage you to have some level of anticipation of what the after effects of what you're doing will be. Maybe watch what happens to other people who do the same kind of thing you're trying to do, ask them about their experiences. Hey, did publishing this make your life better or worse? Because sometimes it can look one way from the outside and not be that way from the inside, But you really have to understand the person you're trying to imitate. And again, it's always imitation. So if you're trying to nail something that you've seen from somewhere else, don't try to do that from your fucking imagination. Ask them how they did it, or like look into it. They might have already wrote a fucking book on it. They might have a bunch of vlogs explaining how they did it, like I do. Like if you want to do something similar to someone else, don't try to not copy it. Because the fact of the matter is, you can't copy it. You cannot make a one to... No one's made a video that feels just like a Golden Witch video. There are people who are close enough, like Gigadonk or Rhyme Kickflips, that like I think if you like my content, you're going to like theirs because it's similar. But it's not the same, you know, and neither of them is like trying to do exactly what I'm doing. But even in their attempt, when they are legitimately like doing a Trixie, it comes out totally unique, you know, which is why people want to be subbed to all of those channels and not, you know, like, oh, well, this is just a worse version of Trixie. It's like, no, this is a different version. This is like another alternate universe, you know, like having another Spider-Man kind of thing. So like, I want you all to, first of all, rewatch fucking the Into the Spider-Verse. But like, yes, you can all be Spider-Man. Like, everybody can be Spider-Man. There can be an infinite number of Spider-Mans. It is not a problem, you know, like, everyone should feel represented. Everyone should be given the opportunity to try to express themselves and get what they're looking for by any means necessary. And just remember that, like, the people who have everything, they're just taking it. Like, the difference between you and them, if you feel like, oh, why don't I have what these people have? You're not willing to just take it. You want to do something more clever than that. But you are overestimating how clever the people who have things are. I'm using the maximum amount of cleverness I have to e-beg and barely scrape by. You know, like, I'm using all of my brain power, all of my creative energy, however cool or helpful or brilliant you might think me and my community are. I am barely scraping by on e-begging, you know, like, so if you are not willing to humble yourself to that kind of reality and be like, it's possible that what I really want to do to be effective, like, isn't going to make me rich or famous ever, you know, or I might struggle for a long time trying to get what I'm trying to do done. Or, you know, you just have to have the mentality that, like, this is your life. It's not something you opt in or out of. It's something you just either fucking really suck at or are really good at, but you don't get to stop. Like, you don't stop being creative. You just turn it to something else, you know? I had friends in high school who were, you know, really into guitar, and then they got really into cars and Street Fighter. And, like, literally playing video games is not less creative than playing guitar. It's just not as much and easily, I was going to say it's not as much of a marketable skill, but it is now. Like, you literally can as easily have a full-time career playing video games and showing people what you do in those video games in an expressive way as you can playing guitar. Like, anything you do is creative, and again, you have to think about the effect you're trying to have. A lot of people just, like, make what they want, and then they're upset that nobody's watching it or acknowledging it. And it's like, you aren't putting it in front of the people who would care about it. You're not, like, the universe is not just going to conspire to make sure that the right person sees your thing. You have to make the right person see your thing. If you want your friend to watch your video, you have to ask your friend to watch your video. If it makes you upset when your friend doesn't watch your video, you have to tell your friend that it makes you upset when they don't watch your video. And if they don't care, then you need to tell them that this is now a person, like, this is a boundary that they're pushing on you. And it makes it harder for you to be around them as a friend because you feel like they can't understand you if they're not willing to put the effort into, you know, helping you communicate by actually listening to your end of the communication. And I don't think you should be pressuring everybody you know to consume everything you make all the time, but that's why it's good to have lots of friends who have different interests that reflect the different things you're interested in, you know? I make a lot of music that people who like videos like this might not enjoy, and I'm not going to hold it against you that you don't like that music too, you know? I have other friends who want to hear the music, who don't even care about videos like this necessarily. So, although usually they do, but you know, like, my point is you can be multifaceted And it's easier to do that when you know more people. And then at some point you will hit a limit. You will hit a limit of how much you want from your creativity. And that's when you'll feel like you've arrived. If you ever do, is when you hit the point where you're like, I actually don't want any more. You know, like, I don't want to enter a higher tax bracket. I don't want to, have to account for a large number of people and their well-being in the effort of realizing my own ambitions. You know, I don't want to have to talk to 10,000 people all the time as opposed to 2,000. You know, like, there are points where you'll just hit and you'll go like, actually, this is cool. You know, like, maybe you find a day job you don't hate. You make art on the weekends with your friends. You watch art from other people on weeknights and you feel good about yourself. That's the creative experience for a lot of career professionals. Like, a lot of people who work in the business, there's not really a lot of money going around. Like, if you're not at the top level, and even then your risk factor is massive in this industry. In the entertainment industry, most people, even who do it like as full professionals, have like a teaching job or something, or, you know, do something else with it. Because if you really are like ambitious, like trying to live an ambitious life monetarily through art, you have to become a business person. You know, like, you are not going to be an artist. You're going to be a business person. If all you care about is just making stuff, you can do that for fucking free. You know, if you're like me and you make vlogs for the internet, the cost of doing that is the cost of the phone, you know, which is expensive, but that's like, for this vlog, I don't necessarily even need a computer. You know, I could stitch this together on my phone, post it to YouTube, and just the cost of phone and internet service is the admission cost of doing this content. And I can do it for as long as this phone can receive service, you know, like, so if that's all I wanted to do and there was nothing else to my life, which has been the case before, then what else is there to want? That was a question I had to ask myself when I left home at 25, because I didn't feel satisfied. I did not feel like talking into the phone was enough. So I went and found more, you know, but I haven't left behind talking into the phone, because I've come to realize it is mostly a form of therapy. And I record way more stuff that I don't release now. You know, I record more stuff that there was a first take of this video, a 10-minute take where I was like, well, this is too rambly and it's not really getting to the point I'm trying to make. Because I want people to feel welcome who I have around me, and not that like I think that the quality of them as like an artist matters. It doesn't. Like, and to me, like, your quality as an artist is really more so like, how can I understand you enough to relate to you and care about you and form memories about you and know who you are and like your presence. You know, do I like having you around? That's what it comes down to for me. And like, I like hanging out with artists because I like making shit. And I don't like making shit with people because they're good. I like making shit with people because they're down, you know, like, they're here and they're down to do it. Like, you know, Riley and I started working together because he walked into my house and knew how to rap. And I went, let's make an album right now. You know, Sarah Louise let me come to her house and we made an album. It was just a fun thing to do. It was every single day of doing it was fun. It was a fun album to make, and it sounds fun. That's why people like it, you know, is because it sounds like a good time. But you're not hearing like you're hearing literally profoundly worse music than either of us is capable of making now, you know, 10 years hence from Gay and Dead. Like, that album is tremendously worse sounding than Ridiculously Adequate Performance that we put out last year. But that album is like a collection of different beats that are all great, and I do a great performance on all of them, a ridiculously adequate performance on all of them, but it doesn't have that feeling of, oh, this takes me back to being in the room, you know, where we're smoking weed together and making all these songs and bouncing ideas off of each other and forming the production around the music, because we're working directly together and not at a distance through to telegraph. And that's why I keep trying to bring people in closer and closer to me so that I can work with them more closely. But there's also a level where I just have to accept the reality of, like, well, I can't afford to have all my friends around all the time. Like, there's a sense of longing that is innate to this artistry that is like, I can't have everything I want from it all the time. I don't have a home studio. If you're somebody who, has nowhere that you can do your art, like, say you love drumming, drumming's a real tough one to have space for. Where can you drum that's not going to piss anybody off? If you don't literally have like a fucking home studio or can afford to go to a studio, where do you practice drums that doesn't piss somebody off? You have to either just be willing to piss people off and capable of pissing people off without too many consequences, or you're fucked, unless you have some kind of access. But maybe if you make friends with somebody who has a space or has a kit and they let you play, that's a way you get to do it, right? So then you end up developing these other skills, these people skills to play into your artistic skills, and that ends up informing the art, and that's how you end up with a creative voice, is survival strategy. It all comes down to evolution and trying to keep yourself alive, the evolution of ideas and concepts, and just seeing something that seems to be working and saying, can I make that work for me? And then if it doesn't, you go, okay, fuck that, let's try something else. And if it does work, you go, fuck, maybe I need to do this some more, or can I do this another way? How do I keep it interesting? How do I keep it working? That's what you need to be thinking about. Not, is this real art? Am I good enough? Fuck that. Is this keeping me alive? Is this keeping my friends around? Is this making me happy personally? Like, do I like listening to this? Do I like seeing it? Do I like showing it to people? Sometimes I enjoy making something and I don't really like showing it to people. Sometimes I love showing something to people that I didn't really enjoy making that much, But it all comes down to, what is the effectiveness? What is the goal? I think I've made myself clear, and I'm getting redundant and I'm filling my phone. So thank you for listening. I'm making this one public because it's just too important not to. Please, enough imposter syndrome. You are an artist. Deal with it.